Forward on. Okay, so I can see everyone's entering their names in the chat box. So here we are at the beginning of the River Ecosystem Campaign Teacher Training. Thank you all for joining us tonight. I just have some slides to show, but then we will mostly, I think, be asking and answering questions. My computer is really slow for at the beginning once I start sharing, so you just have to bear with me for 2 more seconds until I can convince it to change slide. Tasha, could you let me know when that changes slide, please? Are we good?
Oh, we're just waiting.
Can you see the?
There you go.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'll just tell you like 2 minutes about what GLOBE is, and then we'll just move on to, why are we doing this campaign? Why are the EPA interested in it? What do we want to get out of it? We'll talk about sort of the key steps and those little gotcha things that can happen, when you're doing this sort of work with students. We'll talk about our key dates. We'll talk about how we send our data once you've done your river study, and then just talk a little bit about GLOBE projects. And I know there's been some questions around the ecological testing, so I'm going to touch on that as well. Okay, so for those of you that don't know, GLOBE is an international science and education program. It's sponsored by NASA in the States. There's over 120 countries that are involved with GLOBE. It didn't get set up here properly in Ireland until it's about 2017. We are run alongside Green Schools out of the Environmental Education Unit of An Taisce, and we're sponsored, like I said, by the EPA. So that's the Irish EPA. GLOBE stands for Global Learning and Observations to Benefit the Environment. A lot of it is around ground truthing observations that are made by satellite imagery. So there's a lot of that. We have different spheres: the atmosphere, biosphere, pedosphere, which is soil, and the hydrosphere. We'll be focused on the hydrosphere for this campaign. But as some of you may know, we have done a lot of other campaigns. We're probably best known for our air quality campaign. We're going to have our 10th air quality campaign this year. But we also work on How Cool is Your School, which is a surface temperature campaign, and How Spongy is Your School, which is a rainfall and flooding project. We look at phenology, the timing of bud burst, and leaf color change in the autumn. So that's some of our campaigns. We work with about 400 schools in an academic year. Our first river ecosystem pilot was last spring. So we just had a small number of schools take part in that. And actually, some of the images that you'll see of rivers will be from those schools from last year. So you may be wondering why river ecosystem investigation. Well, just, the background here is that unfortunately, our fresh waters are under pressure. Only about half of them, are in kind of good nick. So that means the other half are not great. Our national monitoring body, the EPA, do a great job monitoring the rivers, but they can't get to all of the rivers. And they can only do sort of infrequent monitoring, except for where they have permanent stations. So that's sort of where we come in, and this is the main goal of this project. Is we're trying to have a look at the full, like the whole river system, so not just the water quality, but the area around the river. And you can see in this nice picture on the left, there's a lovely riparian zone. So that's that zone either side the banks of the river. And you can see plenty of variation in the plant life and some trees. It looks like a very healthy river just at first glance. So just what I did right there, we're hoping, that you and your students will be doing something similar. It's just making a very quick observation by looking at the river. That's going to be one of the main steps. So yes, it's difficult to monitor all these rivers. So that's where we come in. The overall message here is to raise awareness amongst the students about the importance of our freshwaters. And then, just by taking them outside and spending time observing and recording, is just to encourage that appreciation of nature and our natural environment. And like I said previously, we really are taking meaningful observations that will be sent to the EPA and the EPA Waters team in this case, and GLOBE, we hope. And then, of course, our mission is to encourage positive actions for our environment. So if something, positive around this can come, like maybe your class are really interested in talking to a local counselor, are doing a litter pickup along the river, whatever it is, as a result maybe of their study, that's a really positive thing. And to be really encouraged if there is interest there, to do something like that. So what I'm going to show you now, if I can encourage my slides to change. Okay, so here we are. It's our colorful campaign timeline. So we are in this early to mid-March period.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Is it changing?
Sorry, I just went over.
Yeah,
Yes.
thanks, Sashka. I know.
Just
So we're preparing for the river campaign. At this point, I know it's busy period coming up to the Easter break. If you did get a chance to introduce your class to the campaign, at this point, we're using one of the presentations that is in the resource package. And then there's a couple of kit items that you'll need to get yourself. And it's really just as simple as a bucket and some rope that some of you probably, have at home or can get in the hardware store. So that's kind of the what's going on right now. And of course, you're here at Tutor Training, which is fantastic as well. So the river visit. So we had a bit of delay, to be honest, with our lab providing just one small part of your kits. And the kit piece that we were missing is on its way, and it's going to be here this week. But as we're putting all the packs together and we're waiting for this extra delivery, we are planning on getting the packs together by the end of the week, but they might not be in the school until next, it could be like any Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. So I know we had said that we would kick off the campaign next Monday, but with the kit arriving a bit late, I'm afraid we'll have to start a little bit late. But we'll do our best, obviously, to get everything out to you as soon as possible. So really that's going to leave you with that week before Easter, maybe late next week or the following week to visit the river. Then we have Easter break, and then we'll have another week and a half about after the Easter break when you can visit the river. So there is, hopefully plenty of time in there, but please do let me know if you see any problems with those dates. We're kind of just trying our best to do what we can at this point with that lab delay. So I just wanted to actually mention one thing. March 19th, so that's Tuesday. It's Tuesday morning. We have an expert kind of webinar for students. And we have 3 experts coming. We have Elaine McGough from Antashka, who some of you may be familiar with her. She's very knowledgeable, particularly around nutrient pollution. We have the EPA's waters team, and we have LawPro. They're the local authority water program. They'll be joining us, and they'll be doing really short presentations, like just 10 minutes long, just on what they're doing around water. It's going to be really nice for students if they can attend, even if it's only for half an hour, and just listen to those experts and then ask them questions. So if you've had a chance then to talk about where you're going to go, which river, or maybe you've even done a bit of the study already, it's a great opportunity for students to have direct contact with the EPA or LawPro and ask them anything they want around water. So I really encourage you to register for that. And then we have after Easter, you have a bit more time to do your river study. The main thing I just ask is that you can complete the online river survey form by April 12th. So that's just going to be a really simple form online that you fill out using your observations and data that you collected at the river. That would be fantastic. We have student presentations then on April 16th, if your students are interested in doing an online presentation. And that's usually a very worthwhile experience. And then any projects, if they could be submitted to us by April 19th for the Globe annual competition, that would be fabulous. Okay, so just on the resources, so probably already, received these resources in an email, but there's, a lot of links all the time. So I just wanted to show you on the right-hand side, that is a Google Drive folder. And in that folder, there are 2 different PowerPoints. There's a River Ecosystem Campaign classroom resource where you'll have a lot of information about the campaign. And then there's one with background information, which gives a little bit more details around water quality in Ireland and kind of more just a local understanding of where we're at right now. The nice picture on the left there, that's a wall chart, and you can print that out. It's A2 size. There's PDF format or PNG format. And if you want to print that out for your classroom, and then you can fill in some of your observations on that, you're more than welcome to. And we'll be adding extra resources in here. You will see worksheets coming in here. Just on the worksheets, they're really for you, for the students, if you want them to record the observations in groups or whoever way you want to organize it, they can record everything on a worksheet, and then that information needs to be put into the river survey form. If you want to enter everything into the river survey form at the river, that's absolutely fine. Like, I don't need to see the worksheets afterwards. They're really for you to do whatever you want with. I do also provide a teacher worksheet, which is sort of has like little cheat sheet part underneath, which shows like, this is why you're asking this question, and these are, some answers that maybe students will come up with. So it's just a little extra information for you. And also there's a link on there. It's the catchments.ie. You see that water map link. If you want to see if your river is currently monitored, you can go there. And there's a really nice interactive map format where you can actually look for your river. You can find the status of it. It may be unmonitored, which really adds value. Then you're thinking, there's no information. No one knows how healthy this river is. So it makes it all the more valuable to do that and think about submitting your data then to the EPA. Okay, I can't see if there's any questions in the chat box, but if anyone has a question, you're more than welcome to ask it right now before I move on to river safety. If there's anything I said so far that you had a question about. Okay, I'll keep going, but absolutely raise a hand or put a question in the chat box if you want to. So I had a couple of queries just around, river safety. And like I said before, I mean, the thing is, your local river and what you can and can't do. And you also, know your age group. Just some tips, like obviously like check the weather in advance. So not just like the weather on the day, but maybe the weather in the last few days, because obviously if there's been a lot of rain, the river will be probably flowing a little faster than usual. It's great if you have a site in mind. Like if I'm doing a workshop on rivers, I always like to have a look before, just yourself, somewhere that's safe to stand. There's no need to get into the water, but you will need to get a water sample. So you need somewhere where you can access, even if it is like a bridge or something. I had said that you need a bucket and rope for the water samples. Obviously, like I've accessed rivers from large bridges where I've just had a really long rope on a bucket, and it can be a little bit hard to maneuver, but you can manage to get it to rinse your bucket and get a good sample regardless. So it's just to think in advance about where would be the most appropriate to go to. Now, if you have a trickle of a river, that's perfect too, if it's particularly small. And if you're happy, and the school's happy if you're getting in the river because it's so it's below the knee, that's fine too. I know some people like to access the river and take measurements, the width and depth and everything. That's totally up to you, but it's definitely not obviously a requirement of this study. Yeah, just watch out for unstable banks. You know yourself. If the students that like to get really close and to the river's edge, just to keep an eye on that. If there's any overhang or erosion on the bank, just to watch out. And obviously to be extra vigilant, like we do. Last year we saw a huge variety in the size of the rivers being sampled. So obviously with the bigger rivers, just to be careful there. Okay, so on the day, so the main things to bring with you are your the assessment kit that you will get in the post, and it's going to have a water thermometer in it. It's going to have some pH, like paper strips. You're also going to get your nutrient sampling kit in there, and you'll have some instructions as well. So that will all be as part of that kit. The bucket and rope, you have to source yourself. If you do want to do any measurements, just obviously bring a tape measure or a meter stick or something. There's the worksheet option, if that makes the most sense. You'll have to take notes anyway, usually. So you're more than welcome to use that worksheet. And then just obviously appropriate clothing and footwear. The other thing that, we would recommend is hand sanitizer. Obviously, like we don't know, how the quality of the water beforehand. And if it was a situation where there was a lot of pollution, and we just really want to make sure that no one gets hurt. So we'd recommend bringing hand sanitizer. Okay. Just, I know you had a few emails just about how to organize the group. I know it's a small enough water quality kit. We've included more in it this year in the hope that everyone, can have a task. And I just thought I'd share just a little bit of information, that if you could, try to work with your group in advance and maybe split up the tasks at that point, you'll be able to see roughly, even just looking at the worksheet, it's the visual observations. You could have a group there, so you could have someone note taking or sketching. The water sampling is a whole thing in itself with the bucket. You know yourself who would suit which task. Then you have the nutrient testing, which is a bit more detailed, a little bit of work involved in that one, and measuring temperature and pH. So yeah, you could split them into groups. I would really advise you to reach out to any parents or other teachers in the school, or even to experts like LawPro. They're the local authority water program. They have officers, water community officers, and they may be able to assist you as well if you wanted someone extra there with you on the day. So they're just suggestions, just based on some questions that I've been asked. Okay, so the day of the visit to the river, like one thing, at the beginning, we really would encourage the students to take their time insofar as possible and to really, make those observations when they get there, and just to try and like use all their senses. So they're listening to the water, they're observing the water flowing by. You could ask them how fast you think it's flowing. Have a look at the habitats around, any sign of, human interference. All those things, it takes a while to tease it out of the group, and it depends on their age. If they're younger, they tend to be generally a bit more curious. But yeah, I guess we really want them to, like, for instance, with that photograph, like you're already running through a checklist in your mind of trying to assess the health. So that part is, we really kind of have to just sort of plant a few seeds, and hopefully they'll begin making those observations with enough time. And then following through the worksheet will prompt some of those questions as well. Just with the river survey form, we just need one set of results per group. And like I said, you don't have to do it at the river, you can do it afterwards too. Okay, so what I want to do now is just move on to just a bit more detail on the different aspects. So like I said, the first one is the visual assessment of the river. I don't really need to go down that and in too much more detail, but it's just remembering, like, the reason why we're asking the questions is really to understand the health of the river. So kind of every question relates back to the health. So if you're in an urban area, the EPA are thinking that, we have roads, we have pollution coming from the roads, we have sewage system. There's a very different potential for pressure there. Whereas you're in a rural area, you might be thinking more about agricultural pressure. So there's just different kind of, the land use will play a big part in the health of the river. So that's why we're asking those questions. Yeah, and the size of your water body. If you can get quantitative and put some numbers in there, great. If not, no problem at all. We will ask questions like, can you see the river bottom? That's really to understand if there's anything in that water column that could be, blocking the light penetrating. You can definitely see it in upland areas, where if you have a lot of peat, you'll see that kind of yellowy color, but you'll often see silt pollution, and you can get a lot of brown kind of color to the water as well. And all of those things will really just take away from the river life, the aquatic life that's in there. So that's why we're asking those questions. In terms of habitats, often we think of the riparian zone habitats alone. So students will probably end up just mentioning the trees maybe, and maybe any grass or plant life along the banks of the river. But we also want to draw their attention to the habitats that we find in the river. So there are three sort of main habitats that we'd like to see, if they can, and see these along the section of river that they examine. So you might wondering why these three habitats. Well, there's different creatures will live in different areas of the river, depending on the conditions. So like how much oxygen there is available, or if they have to, bury deep into the substrate, or if they want to take a rest in a pool. So I'd encourage the students to take their time with that. We're looking for a riffle, which in general would be that, shallow water where you can see a lot of rocks and you get a little bit of turbulent flow. It's a really oxygenated environment. So it's often the place where you see a lot of creatures in the substrate below those rocks. And then there's the run or glide, which is the fastest moving part of the water column. And then those deeper areas with very slow moving water are the pools. Where we've managed to, concrete over a lot of our rivers, obviously we've destroyed the in-stream habitats. So that's probably what we're trying to really see here. Are there any habitats left within the river? Because that will be a great sign of life. We would love you to record as much information around what you can see in the riparian area and then around the river in terms of birds, mammals, any life that you can identify. And obviously some students will be really good at this and maybe quite knowledgeable. So encourage them to make and observe those different habitats around the river. We also ask you to assess pollution around the river, and sometimes it's in the river. This little word cloud, it was taken from last year's pilot that we ran. And you can see, with the word cloud, it's the item that the word that appears most frequently is the largest. And unfortunately, in this case, it's plastic, and not really too surprising. But you can take a look at the other words there. There's foam, cones, scooters, growth. I'm not quite sure why we have what that was in relation to. A buggy, rubbish cans, pipes. All of these things are interesting because you can tell a lot about the surroundings and what's going into the rivers. So we're also interested in recording that side of things. So it's a full sort of visual assessment of the health of your river. Okay, so I'm just going to pause there for a second because I'm conscious I'm going through that part really fast. Has anyone any questions about what we just covered so far? I'm just going to have a quick look in that chat box. Oh yeah, so that's Deirdre, that's a good question. Is it important to take a sample from the same place each time? So what we would do for the water sampling, like we would take a few different samples. The main thing to do there is just to be careful that you don't disrupt the bed of the river. So when you put your bucket in, you don't kind of want to scrape it along the bottom. You're sort of trying to get that middle part of the water column. Now it's easier said than done. If your river's really shallow, I should say, that you can't, it's very hard to get that sample. So just try your best. But yeah, we'd recommend a few different locations if you can, ideally. That's a good question. Has anyone else any questions? I'm conscious I can't see anyone, so please do speak up if you have any questions at all there. Okay, that's fine. We'll have more time, in a minute to ask any further questions. So yes, on the water sampling, like I just said, so using your bucket and rope, or whatever you can use. I put some pictures in there from last year, so you can see some people had some quite, different looking devices that look quite high tech. Whatever works for you is fine. It's really just making sure you rinse your sampling device ahead of time, like with the actual river water, ahead of your sampling. Just give it a rinse 2 or 3 times just to prevent any contamination. So that's the main thing there. So just use what you can and just make sure it's rinsed and be safe. Just with the water temperature, I know most people have taken that training online. We have a few different size thermometers. So it's really just about putting the thermometer in the water and waiting for 3 minutes so you can have someone time that. And then all of the thermometers, we've tested them all at this point and they're all functioning. We have a string tied into most of them now, so they don't disappear into your bucket. We will get gloves in your kit too. So good idea to whoever is doing that part to wear the gloves as well, just for safety. We have a new pH kit. Because we were using the old those pH strips, there's sort of a cheaper one last year, and I just felt like the color scheme wasn't really well defined within the normal range that you might get. So we've gone a bit more sophisticated this time around. So you'll see the picture on the bottom left. you will be receiving, that's your color chart, and the sampler is on the right-hand side. So it's a paper strip and it's got 3 different squares with different colors. And what this does is you just kind of have to think about it for a second at the beginning. But what's going to happen is, like, if you look at the color chart, it starts at 2 and it goes up to 9. So you're not looking at the full, like, 0 to 14 on the pH scale. So it's a little narrowed. But you'll see at the lower end, it's that pink part on the left that will really show the most color change. It'll go really dark blue. Whereas you'll see the yellow colors will stay roughly about the same. So just you have to look at that whole section and compare all 3 colors to the color chart, if that makes sense. I'm going to put a little video in this together because I feel like it might take a minute just if you're not used to working with it like this. And I'll stick that video in with the resources so I can describe it a little bit better then. And I'm sure some of you are well familiar with this, but I just know it was different to what we sent last year. And it should just make it a bit easier to get a more accurate result. That's what we're hoping. So we shouldn't see any really spurious or particularly low. I mean, in some cases you can have a low pH, like obviously if you're going where there's been some mine drainage or something, you might see a low pH. But in general, it should be around that neutral value. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. But like I said, I'll put a video together on that. And then we move to the nitrate and phosphate. So that's our nutrient pollution. I think the main thing to get across to the students when you're looking at nutrient pollution is that, like, because we're looking at nitrogen and phosphorus, like, they're essential for life. So a good analogy is just food, right? So we want food and we need food, but if we eat too much, it's bad for us. So it's kind of the same idea with this. It's like we have to have nitrogen and phosphorus in the system for life. But where we have it in excess, then we have a problem. Now, obviously, you can go to extremes, like some of our lakes, unfortunately, in Ireland, had this issue recently around eutrophication, where you just get buildup of a lot of algae and they kind of zap the oxygen then from the water. So that's when it goes to the extreme. But so I mean, what we're talking about here is that when fertilizer and waste sewage, unfortunately, have gone into the river, they're really the main sources of nitrogen. And so in this case, nitrate and phosphate. So that's really what you're measuring for. It will depend, there's some regions in Ireland where you're more inclined to get nitrate pollution, so in the south and east. And there's other regions, like urban areas, where you're a bit more likely to get phosphate pollution. But you can get surprising results. We had a school last year find some quite surprising results in Donegal that the EPA were very interested in. That was a case of untreated effluent, unfortunately. So that's why we're measuring it. This one, there's just a couple of things to note. You will receive a really small plastic sampling jar. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but I'm just on it right now. It's only, about this size. There's a line on there, so you'll have to fill the water up halfway to the line on that sampling tube, and that gives you the exact right amount of water to be mixed with your reagent, which are going to be in these 2 tubes. So you have one tube with a P and one with an N. This is your phosphate reagent, and you can kind of see the powder in the bottom, although the picture is not fabulous. And same with the nitrate, there's a reagent in the bottom of that. So here's just where it gets a tiny bit tricky with the students, because they're always really curious, well, depending on the age, of this kit. The first thing they need to do is to remove the pin at the top. It's tiny, it's holding in this very small hole. So they have to remove the pin, and then just obviously don't throw it in the ground. Just store that somewhere so you can put it in the bin. And so that's your hole in that tube with the reagent in the bottom. The next thing to do is to squeeze all the air out of the tube. You can hold it upright, but then you have to pinch it and hold the pinch. And then you're going to turn it upside down, put it into the sampling little device to get your water. So you hold all that air out of the tube, and then you put that tube into the water and you let go, and then it sucks up all the water. You might get you might have to shake it a little bit just to make sure that powder dissolves in the water just at first. That's how it works. And I understand we're going to be sending more of these to each of you. So not just one of each. we'll have more going this time just in case anything happens. The main thing is here is you have to time the reaction. So for nitrate, it's 3 minutes, and phosphate, it's 5 minutes. And this is on the instruction sheets, so no problem there. And then what's going to happen is the water with the reagent is going to change color. And you'll be given, there's color charts for each different one. There's a phosphate color chart and a nitrate color chart that you can see up there in the top right. And you're going to have a look at the color in your tube, you know, after the 3 minutes or the 5 minutes, and you're going to compare it to the color chart. We find with a group, there can be a lot of, obviously it's a bit subjective. So it's good to get a consensus. So we'll often, you know, put your tube right up next to the color chart and say, does it more closely match this one or that one, or is it in between, or whatever it is, you know, and trying to get that group consensus to try and remove some of that subjective observations. And sometimes that can make it a little more accurate. It does take a little bit of time to do this, and like you can have someone work the timer, someone's in charge of the color chart, someone's making sure the sampling to the little container is filled up halfway. The person that's pinching the air out has to understand that they have to keep pinching it until it goes into the water. So there's a few different jobs there. But they're reasonably accurate, and they should give you a good indication of what's going on with regards to nutrient pollution. So that's just an image there of us doing it in a workshop just a few weeks ago, and the students trying to match it more closely with the color chart that was for nitrate. So you'll have all of these instructions, but again, just take your time, and hopefully the students will get the hang of it pretty quickly. So what will the results mean? So I've included these because I wanted you to know kind of what the EPA think of the different results. So if you're interested in that, the numbers are here are what the EPA currently have. They don't match the color chart perfectly. So you're going to have to roughly match it. Just it's nice if you can give some feedback to the students and just to say, well, this is a low level, so it was less than 0.9, and you can have a look at what you measured. And you can see 0.9 is here. So any of these two colors of nitrate on the left are going to be, you know, low nitrate pollution. And obviously then the darker yet, you can enter into this unsatisfactory region. But of course, you know, this is citizen science, so we're just looking at indications rather than, you know, some kind of sophisticated monitoring. Okay, so in addition to the river survey form, you can also use the Globe Observer app, and that's just to put in your temperature information and your pH information. I won't go through this in detail. Like you can download the app, and once you have your teacher account, you can, you know, access that using your password and your email address that you use to sign up, and then you can enter your pH and water temperature data in there. It will figure out your location using the GPS on your device. If you have it, if not, you can, you know, choose your location off the map. The reason for doing this is because, you know, they're concerned about more global measurements, keeping track of water temperature and pH all around the globe and trying to identify any trends. So that's why they're interested in this, and they can tie it in with some satellite observations around the Earth's energy budget, and particularly around surface temperature and water temperature. So there are the steps in there. It's really self-explanatory. You just kind of click through the different boxes, and then you just choose pH paper instead of pH meter. That's just the method that you use. An alcohol filled thermometer instead of probe. So there's not too many options in there, and it's fairly straightforward, but do let me know if you have a problem. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And I'm just going to take a look. So what I want to do now is, like, I dumped a ton of information on you. So I just kind of want you to have a think about your own area. And if you have any specific questions, just anything at all, please ask them just while I look through the chat box. Okay, so like for some people, like just on direct messages in here, it's more about the difficulties around sampling. Obviously, like if you can't get very close to the river, if you can find a bridge, that's great. In terms of the making the observations, like safety is obviously important, and a lot of our rivers would have maybe overgrown areas on the banks. So like obviously you know, we're trying to feed this information back in a citizen science element, but it is as well about the students getting outside and making, you know, what observations they can. So if there's any issues around that, just do your best. And, you know, hopefully they still kind of get an appreciation for the rivers and the importance of them. Even if you can't do every single part, do what you can. And we're happy to kind of get anything back really is as a benefit to us. So there's another question about, does it matter if the river is tidal? Yeah, you know, it does with your pH. I think the salt concentration might affect that. I think you'd have to measure the conductivity as well. But like, I would say just go ahead and measure the pH, and like I'll send you an email, Alan, about that because it'll get a little bit more detailed. But I do think we might have some conductivity meters in the office. But yeah, so I'll send you an email on that. But it is a really interesting thing to talk to the students as well, because the ecosystem will change in that brackish area close to the sea compared to, you know, if you went upstream, you'd see sort of a different environment in terms of the plants in the riparian zone and maybe what creatures hang around there. So yeah, I think it's still, you know, a really nice way to study it. And I think they'll get more of a feeling as well for everything that goes into the river is heading out to the sea. Which is, you know, surprisingly, you know, sometimes there's a bit of a gap in understanding in terms of like even just, you know, where wastewater goes. Oh, I have a lot of students that think they just go straight into the rivers. They weren't as sure about the wastewater treatment plants. So it's good to just raise that awareness. Has anyone any other questions just on everything we've covered so far, just in terms of what you're going to be doing yourselves at your river or stream? Anything at all is fine. If not, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen again and just talk about the last part because I know I got a couple of questions. It's going to be kind of annoying. Sorry, everyone. Every time I reshare, it just loves to go super slow. Okay, so hopefully everyone can see that slide. So like I said, try your best. It'd be great to get that river survey form sent back by April 12th. But we would love to see the projects from the students. So this is our last campaign of the academic year, and we do have a big event coming up on May 10th. And we would love students to be able to attend the event and show some of their water studies. So we have a deadline, which is a little bit tight, but it's only because our event is May 10th. The deadline is April 19th for a project. And it can be on any aspect of the study or follow the interests of the students in relation to water. I have put in a template for a poster, with just some guidelines. If you wanted to do more of a science poster, that's going to be there that you could use that to populate with your information, but you're also welcome. There's a lot of different categories in our Globe Ireland competition, from engagement with the community, you know, different actions you can take around the environment. We've already had submissions of great songs and poetry and everything. So the criteria is in a link there, so you can have a look and see. And maybe you've taken part in one of our campaigns and have already submitted a project. So please do one on water if you can. Lastly, so we would love obviously schools to be doing ecological testing, but at this point we just don't really have the resources to send out this part of the equipment. And it's all about doing a kick sample of the substrates of the riverbed and finding the macroinvertebrates. So those little invertebrates that don't have a backbone, but you can see them with the eye. And there's a lot of life down there on the riverbed. There's some creatures that are very sensitive to pollution, and there's some creatures that are very resilient. So you can do ecological testing based on this. And there's a scoring sheet, which is provided by LawPro, who I mentioned already. And it's a really nice way to assess the health of your river. We do this as part of workshops occasionally, and you kind of work out, basically, there's a traffic light system, and whether you've got a poor health, moderate health, or good health. So I just wanted to say on this, like, because we're really keen to sort of move in this direction. So we will be setting up, I think we're going to do two kind of workshops that you can sign up to if you want to. We won't be able to go to individual schools, but we're going to do two regionally, and you could sign up to them, and we would have some equipment to share, a limited amount of equipment to share. But we could show you how to do the kick sample at that, and maybe you could go back and do that with your group. And that's going to take place that first week after Easter. So there'll be more details coming on that. And I understand that's not going to be possible for a lot of groups, but I'm just kind of putting it out there as an option because this is a direction we'd like to move in. And of course, it's all about the actions that you can take around water. So, if you can encourage the students at all to get involved in this aspect and thinking about, where their water comes from, where it ends up, how they can conserve water, how they can improve pollution, maybe, litter picks and avoiding plastic and all the things that we know about, that would be a great success for the campaign as a whole. There's some extra resources in the back of this PowerPoint as well. If you're interested in following up, there's that catchments link and a few EPA reports and EcoEye videos, depending on your age group. Okay, just now we're almost at time over, but if there's a few questions. So there's one here from Sinead. We have different areas where we could access the river to get samples. One is within the town, another further downstream towards the water treatment plants. Oh, interesting. Ideally, if you could visit multiple different locations, particularly if it's quite focused like that, where you have something that could be quite interesting in between, like a treatment plant. Yeah, so I think what I would suggest there, if you're going to go to 3 different locations, you could actually submit 3 different river survey forms, and you can just label them at like upstream or at treatment plant and downstream. I think that's a lovely science investigation if you could do that. If you can only go to one location, just submit one survey form. But yeah, I think that's lovely. Like that's the essence of this study, isn't it? And I encourage, like, if you do find something like that, like ask the students, like, how do we go figure this out? Like, there's something in the water here, how do we work this out? Like if we were going to call the EPA now on the phone, what would we say to them? And what would our plan? And hopefully they'll come up with ideas like, well, we could go upstream or look at the other tributaries upstream or something like that to get them thinking the catchment scale, like the bigger picture. That would be great. Are there any more questions at this point? I'm just conscious that everyone's probably knackered after a long day. If there's anything else I can help you with. If you think of anything afterwards, like it's absolutely fine, to phone. My phone number, I think, is on the bottom of all those emails. Or if you want to text, we will, set up a WhatsApp group for this study, just for the duration of the study. It can suit some people to have that as a WhatsApp group, and other people they might just put it on mute or not join, and it's really fine. I think for some folk, like if put some videos up there and some more links, maybe more instructions, and it could be the situation where you ask a question when you're actually out at the river and you wanted a quicker answer. So that's absolutely fine. But honestly, if you don't want to join another WhatsApp group, I totally understand. So it's really up to you. I'll send out that link there. Just another question. Will observe my count of previous observations on animals count? Noise will scare. Yeah, like that's a really good point, to get a crowd of students coming up, and yeah, if there was any life around, it may disappear. Like we like to keep this focused on what you see when you're there, unfortunately. But it's a really good question. So maybe, at the very end, there's just this box of the end of the survey, and you can add extra information in there. So if this is your local river and you go by frequently, you kind of have your own kind of personal understanding of it that you want to add in some details. That's great because oh yeah, like if you really know your local river and you have any observations to add, particularly around how it changes with time, and like if there is evidence of pollution that you made and didn't capture in the day, or evidence of more life that you weren't able to catch with your big group. So I really hope that we can get our kits packed up. I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that lab delivery in the next few days, and we'll have everything out to you. I can confirm anyway. and you know, they should be with you next week. I don't know how you're fixed with when you want to do your river study, but if there's someone that's like really planning, wanted to go early next week, you know, I just want to make sure that you're in the first batch that go out, just in case we don't get all of those kits material in. So if you could send me an email, just if you're planning on going, like if you had a big plan to go on Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, just let me know, please, and I can see what I can do. So that's all from me. I hope you were able to get something out of this. Like I said, keep checking that folder with the resources in there. I'll be updating it with those worksheets and a video on the PH. And if there's anything else at all, just give me a shout and ask away. So thanks everyone for joining.